Okay, so today you got two handouts, one of which was split onto 2 pages, even though it's supposed to be back and front. Sorry, Copy Center did what it did. Anyway, first one is assignment 201, which is your first assignment. It's not due for a while. It's due on the 23rd of February, so you got a couple weeks to work on it. You will have lots to do between now and then, but when you have extra time at the end of class, it's worth starting on it. And so you will take this as your first opportunity to model something of your own creation. I've been scripting a lot of things and trying to teach you a lot of things as we go forward, but when you have to make something out of your own head, you end up deciding how to go about drawing it in a non-scripted way. And I think that's a really useful thing in Rhino to try to figure out how your workflow works and what tools you're going to use. And along the way, you're going to run across a lot of things that, oh, I really want to do this. How do I do it? And that's part of how you learn Rhino. So you should start on assignment 201 every day when you finish early. You can work on it. There's a lot of time between now and when it's due. Therefore, you can get it done in class, I would say. But it's, again, up to you. If you use your time to do the exercise and you don't have extra time, you'll have to spend a little bit more time outside of class on it. You're welcome to look through the gallery of previous work on the course website. As a reminder, if you go to Student Work, Digital Tools 2, Assignments, and then pick 201, this is all the work that's been done. Well, there's a few miscategorized things, but if we come down here, we've got some tables and chairs that people have done, and you can see those as example tables and chairs. There's some more pillows. We'll talk about how to build a pillow and that sort of thing. So you can get a pretty good sense for what people have done in the past, and you're going to be doing something similar. Okay. Again, it's up to you in terms of what the design is. I don't care if it's structurally feasible to do what you're doing, or if the chair works with gravity or not. So this is not a construction class. It's not a design build class. You're not going to actually have to build it. It just has to look pretty. So you got quite a bit of flexibility. Anyway, you can look through the examples and just to get a sense of what people have done in the past. So today we're going to continue with modeling components, trying to build little pieces, and then how do you assemble them and that sort of thing. The important thing to understand today is that we're using a different set of tools, and again, these tools build on the tools that we used last time. So each day I'm trying to give you a new set of skills to work with. Today we're going to talk about basically creating tubes and pipes and those kinds of objects. And I'll give you a few other examples that you don't actually have to use today, but of where you might end up using these as we go forward. So as normal, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate what we'll be doing, and then you guys will be free to work through it and see how it goes. Okay, so I'm going to work with the Polyline tool to start. And I'm just going to pick, and I think I was very specific about where I started, but I don't really mind where I start for right now. I am going to make sure that I turn on ortho so that that's running. I do have my object snaps available should I need them. And I'm just going to go ahead and start here with the top line, which is 13 inches. And so I'll type 13 inches in that direction, and I'll hit enter. Now on either end of this, I have 2 arcs. Which have a radius of 2 inches. So I'm going to need to do 2 arcs. And it's useful when you're doing the arcs to go ahead and click on the arc tool and then see what types of arcs we can do. Right? So we have an arc with a start, an end, and a radius. Right? We have an arc with a start, a center, and an angle. And so to me, the start and the end and the radius is pretty good. This start and center and angle is pretty good. Either one of those should get you there. If we're picking the center of the arc, we're going to use our smart tracking to get there. So once again, I have smart track enabled. I leave that little white point, drag it down this direction, and I'm going to specify 2 inches. That would be the radius. And then I'll connect here and then fold over to there. Okay, to create that arc. If I'm doing it from this side, right, I could use a different tool. Again, any of these arcs work fine. In this case, it's the start, the end, and the radius. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my start here. Now I'm going to use the relative coordinates to get this position. So I'll say at, and I'm going in the x direction 2 inches, comma, negative 2 inches, because I'm going down in the y direction. That's my end of arc. And then it's going to ask me what the radius is. Okay, so I know that the radius was 2 inches, so I'll specify 2 inches. And then I have it that way. So different arc tools, I get the same place. It just depends on what works correctly in your brain to make it easy. Okay, so I have these 3 pieces together now. And what I want to do is I want to select them and join them together. So I'll select them all and go up to the Edit menu and then Join. Or I could just type Join, and that makes them into one open curve. Okay. Now we're going to use the Rotate 3D command, which you used last class, to rotate these up so that they're in the 3rd dimension. So right now they're flat, right, existing right on the ground plane. I want to rotate them up, so I'm going to do Rotate 3D. I could also go up to Transform and then Rotate 3D. And I'm going to pick my axis of rotation from one of these little arcs to the other arc, which is basically at the bottom. And then I want to rotate from this direction up into that direction. Now remember, I have my object snap, or excuse me, I have my ortho enabled, which you can't see, which is allowing me to snap it right up to be perfectly vertical. If I didn't have that on, I might get a slight angle to it. And so I want to be very precise about how I'm going about doing this. Okay, so now I'm going to use the circle command, which is right here, to create a circle with the center being, remember it says center of circle, with the center being right here, right there. Okay? And I want the diameter, right, of this to be a 1/2 inch. And so I have to make sure that diameter is specified rather than radius. Diameter is specified, and I'm going to say this is 0.5 inches. And I get a nice little circle that looks something like this. Okay, make sense so far? Okay. So what I ultimately have is I have a curve that defines what I want the tube, pipe, rod to look like, and I have the cross section of it. And now I want to actually build a surface out of it. Right now it's just a set of lines, so there's no surface to it. And the easiest way to do that is to use a command called Sweep1 Rail. And it's under Surface, Sweep1 Rail. The key command is Sweep1 to do it. And when I click on Sweep1 Rail, it's going to say select the rail first. So I'll select the rail first. Then it'll say select cross-section curves. And I'll select the cross-section curve. There it is. I could pick more than one, but I'm only picking one for right now. And when I hit enter, it's going to say, okay, is there a seam, right? Just where do you want this to seam? Usually the default is just fine, so I'll hit enter one more time. And freeform is usually the right strategy unless you're trying to build a ramp. And I'll show you an example of a ramp in just a second. Freeform is usually the way you want to do it. And you'll see a preview of it right here. And you can see that it built a tube for me with that circular cross section that follows the curve that I created. Okay, so it's a really great way of building complicated objects. Okay, so I have that. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to finish it, and then we'll switch my view into shaded mode so we can see it. Okay, so that turned out pretty well. I want to make a couple more demonstrations of how this works. Right. The first one that I'll do, these are both approximations, is that I'm going to create a cross-section curve. Right. And again, this is bonus stuff, so you don't actually have to do this. Let me go ahead and rotate this 3D. And I'm going to go once again along this axis. I'm going to go from right there. I'm going to fold it down this time. So you see I have that. Okay. This curve is flat right now, but I can still do a sweep. So we're going to do a sweep 1. Select the rail. That's going to be my rail. Cross-section curve. There's my cross-section curve. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. Seam is fine there. And it builds, right, a nice little shape for me. And go ahead and say OK. And there's my nice little shape that it built. Okay, so it follows right along that curve. Okay, so that's a sweep 1. I have the option, however, I'm copying this just so that I can show you another demonstration here, which you've probably seen, I have the option to do something called a sweep 2. And so if we go up to surface and I say sweep 2 rails this time, it's going to say select first rail, that's my first rail, select second rail, that's my second rail, and I didn't copy my cross section, hold on. Alright, let's do that again. Sweep 2 rails. First rail, second rail, cross section curve is here, and when I hit enter, seam, right, it's going to do something slightly different. Okay, so it's going to take this cross section curve, keep it consistent between both curves, and when I get over here into the place where the curves get further apart, the whole cross section gets a lot bigger. Does that make sense? So it follows the curves, and the object gets bigger or smaller, depending. So you could very easily create like a vase with this. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility with what you could end up creating with the Sweep 2. Okay. Likewise, this doesn't have to be something that's flat on the ground. It can be going up. So if I had a cross-section curve, just a second here. I'm going to rotate this 3D. Looks like I didn't quite draw it correctly. That's fine. Okay, and if I sweep 1, there's my rail, there's my cross section, there's my seam. Now, in this context, right, it's freeform, so it tips down there and then kind of tips up and over as it goes along. You guys kind of see how that falls? If I switch from freeform to road-like top and then click preview, it should stay flat as it goes along. See how it's flat as we go through? So it's a different structure to it. Okay. The other thing I have the flexibility of doing is I can sweep 2 rails. 2. First rail, second rail, cross section curve, seam, and we'll go ahead and say OK. Right. And this then shrinks and expands as the 2 lines get closer or further apart. Okay? So I'm showing you these as supplemental examples for what the sweep really does. What you're doing today in the exercise is rather simple, right? But it's important to recognize how much flexibility you have in that long term. Okay, so let's go back to our little object here. I'm going to select the object, oops, and then type Z enter and then S enter for selected, so that I'm orbiting around the object itself. Okay. So I now have that piece taken care of. The next thing that I want to do is I want to make a little extrusion that represents a little button that's going to hold a glass panel. Okay. And so I'm going to use, underneath my primitive shapes here, I'm going to use my cylinder tool, and I'm going to start at the center here, and I want to make sure that the diameter this time, right, so again diameter selected, is 1.5 inches. There it is. And my height, I'm going to do negative 0.25. And it seems to me I say, right, that's good. Oh, good. I corrected it. Good. So I have this one. Then I'm going to copy this shape. And I want it to be V for vertical. And I'm going to go down. We can do it from the center again, or if we can do from one of the sides. Negative 0.75 inches, which is going to leave me with a ½ inch gap for my sheet of glass. Okay? So I have a button on top and a button on bottom with a little ½ inch in between. Okay? So the good news is I can use mirror to my advantage here. So I'll select both of those buttons and then use transform mirror. I think it's under transform, right? Again, I always type it. mirror. There it is. Okay, I was right. And we'll mirror from the midpoint to there, and I end up with the second set of little buttons. Okay, so I have those two pieces put together quite nicely, and now I'm going to go ahead and copy this because I want these two to intersect at 90 degrees. So let me take this, and I'll go to transform and then copy, or type copy. And I'm going to specify, this is a trick. I don't have to do it this way. I can copy and paste it like this, where I click a spot, put it over here, and then I'll combine them together afterward, right? Or when I do that initial copy, I could specify in place, and when I specify in place, it makes one copy exactly on top of the other one, right? Then I can come in and I can say rotate. This is not a rotate 3D, it's just a regular rotate. And I'm going to specify the very center, which is the midpoint here. And I'm going to say I want to go 90 degrees. And I end up with that copy. So I saved the step of moving back and forth. Right? It's the same thing as if I copied, put it over here, selected this, rotate, there, and then move to right back there, right? It's the same thing, but I cut out 3 or 4 steps. So as you get more and more comfortable in Rhino, you'll find that when you can cut out the steps, it makes life a little bit easier. So that's why I try to show you where the places are to cut. So I need to make a few adjustments to this in terms of where it's going to line up. So I'm going to go ahead and select this shape, and I want to move it, because I didn't start right at the origin, I'm going to move it over to the origin. So I'm going to go ahead and say move, and I'd really like to move it such that the inside, instead of the center here, I'd like to be down below. So I'm going to turn on my center snap and snap from the center of that circle, right, the bottom, and I'll put that at 0, 0, 0. Okay, it just makes things a little bit cleaner. Doesn't really matter where it is. Then I'm going to go ahead and say rotate. This is again just a regular rotate. The center is going to be from 0, 0. And I want to go 45 degrees. I'm going to specify 45. And that then allows me to have these look like a little cross there. Make sense so far? Yeah? Alright, so let's delete this out because I don't need this. And now we're going to repeat the similar set of commands. And that is to create the little outrigger that's shown in the diagram on the back that's going to hold the little rod. And I will continue along with this, but it's really repeating a lot of the same things. When I design these exercises, very frequently, I do something and then I repeat it again so that you guys have to repeat it again. So we're building something to go with this, but it's really repetition of the same thing that we've done before. Okay. Let me make sure I get my correct piece here. All right. So I'm going to do a line, right, that's 2 feet long. And so I'm going to work over here in space, and then I'll move it after the fact. I'm going to do a polyline, and we'll say 2 feet. There it is. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And I want to create a 1/2 inch rod, right, that represents this piece. So I can come in here to one end. I can use the circle tool again. I'll specify the end point. My diameter is a 1/2 inch. I'll go ahead and hit enter. Now, if I did a sweep along this rail, right, it wouldn't show out because I don't have this rotated up in space. So we do need to do a rotate 3D. So I'll go to transform, rotate 3D. I'll pick that as my axis, and I'll fold this up like that. And now I can do the sweep. So I'll go to surface, sweep one rail, select the rail. That would be the rail. I'll hit enter. Oops, sorry. I don't have to hit enter. There's the surface, sweep one. There's the rail. Cross-section curve is right there. Now I'll hit enter. Seam is okay. And I'll say okay. And it will build that little piece of the pipe for me. Okay. So now I need to build the little donut that's on the end, which will repeat this yet again. And so I need a couple circles to do that. First one that I'm going to do is the outermost circle. So I'll click on the circle command here, and I'm going to specify the diameter as being 1 3/4, so 1.75 inches. There it is. And I'm going to specify the interior diameter, right, as being 3/8. Okay. So once again, I'll do a circle from the center, and my internal diameter, right, should be 3/8. So I'll do 3/8 and then enter. And so I end up with, oops, not centered correctly. Hold on a second. Move this from its center. Be right there. All right. So I end up with an outer circle and an inner circle. Okay. Now I need a circle that's cross-section between them. So I'm going to go back up to my circle command here, and instead of picking a center and a radius, I'm going to pick the diameter method. Okay. So I'm going to pick diameter, and it's going to say, where do you want to start? I'm going to start from right here. Now I've chosen to turn on what's called quadrant snap, which basically means on a circle it divides it into 4, north, south, east, and west, and lets you snap to those 4 corners of a circle, even though circles don't have corners, but you get the idea, right? So I have quadrant snap checked, and I'm going to snap from here to there. And you see how it builds a nice circle for me based on that diameter. Okay. Could I mentally do the math, 1 3/4 minus 3/8, and come up with whatever it is, 1 inch and 3/8, right? Yeah. For this, sure, but I would rather just do it from the diameter and not have to do any math. I do need to rotate this so that it's standing up in 3 dimensions, so I'll go back up to transform and then rotate 3D, and we'll go from here to there. Oops, I did that too fast, sorry. Let me practice one more time. There to there, and then I'll fold it up like that. Perfect. And now I'm going to come back and do the sweep again. Now I only need to do a sweep 1, right? And this is the reason that I like this part of the exercise, is it shows you that the line or the rail of the sweep doesn't have to be in the center of the circle, right? I can sweep around either of these 2 rails. So let me go to Surface, Sweep 1 rail, and it's going to say Select Rail. I can pick either the inside or the outside, it doesn't matter. Select cross-section curve. There's my cross-section curve. I'll go ahead and hit enter. It's going to ask me where the seam is. That's fine. I'll hit enter, and it will then build out a nice little donut on the end of this. Okay. Need to do a little bit more cleanup in that I need to make some trims. So let me use this object here. Oops. Let me use this object here, and I'll type trim, and I'm going to trim off those 2 pieces of the object. Okay. And I end up with a very nice little donut, right? My rod, etc. Okay, so now I need to rotate this up in 3 dimensions so that I can put it right here on the little clamp. So I'll use rotate 3D again. It's under transform, rotate 3D. I have to select my objects. There they are. Rotation axis is going to be right here from this point. This is the axis because I want to fold this up into 3 dimensions. There it is. Now I want to move this, and now technically it's 2 feet all the way to the surface of the glass, and I made the rod 2 feet. But when I move this from here, if I use snap and snap to that midpoint, it's a little bit too tall. Okay, so I still need to move it down vertically, and so we'll go ahead and use move, and then I'm going to type V for vertical, and I'll pick this, and then I will use my quadrant snap or my circle snap to get a reference point right there and move that down. Okay, so I have that down correctly, but I do need to do a little trim. So let's use these two objects as a trim. I'll hold down Shift, I'll type trim, and we'll get rid of the back side of that little rod. So now we have a very nice intersection there, for what this looks like. I do also need one more little piece that represents the little tension cable, which is 3/8 in diameter. So I'm going to come here. I have that circle from before, but I need a line that is 6 feet. So I'll snap to the center of this circle and draw a line out here at 6 feet. Like that. And then I'll do one more sweep. So I'll go sweep 1, under surface, sweep 1 rail. That's my rail. That's my cross-section curve. That's my seam. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And I end up with a piece of this. Now we're going to ultimately combine this together with more of them. So I'm building deliberately only a part of this, because then it will seam together down the road. Okay. So I need to include a glass panel for this. So conveniently, I still have this line here. Otherwise, I would have to draw a line straight down. But I still have that line, which is why I built it this way. And I'm going to go ahead and create a box. And we'll start at the center right there. And this time, it's going to be relative coordinates at 4 feet, comma 6 feet. And the thickness of it is going to be negative 0.5 inches. There it is. And that represents one of my pieces of glass. Now, since I modeled it correctly, I have a little button on top and a little button on the back side, right? And the glass goes all the way through. Okay. Once I have this in position, I need to do one more rotate 3D. So let me take this whole object, and we'll go up to transform, rotate 3D. And I'm going to rotate along the surface of this glass right now. We're going to go from here to there is my rotation axis, and we'll fold the whole thing up so that it's a vertical surface and ultimately a vertical wall. And I'm going to move that point to 0, 0 just to make my life a little bit easier down the road. So we'll take that and we'll go to 0, 0. Move 0, 0. There it is. And now I've finished this piece of the puzzle. Okay? So this is what I'm asking you to build today. If you make it to this point, it wouldn't hurt you to go ahead and apply materials to this object. So I'll review that as well. I'm going to click on the V-Ray material editor, right? And I'm going to right click on scene materials and say load material. By now, in all likelihood, you have the materials on your flash drive, so this is easy. We're going to go into my V-Ray materials, and I'm going to load a metal material. And I don't really care what material you load. I'm going to load titanium, a matte titanium. Why not? And then I'm going to go ahead and load a basic glass. I'm going to go V-Ray materials. I'll go to glass, and I'll pick basic glass. Now, in reality, this probably isn't going to look all that great because I don't have a sky and things for the glass to reflect. So you could pick one of the other ones. Again, the skyscraper glass is similar. You're not going to get too much out of it because you don't have an environment to reflect. So I'll stick with basic glass. I'll go ahead and load it, and we can preview it. And that looks like glass. And my titanium looks like titanium. Okay, I have those two assigned. Now I'll come back over to the layers and kind of clean things up a little bit. Let's make a layer that's called glass. And I'll put this object on the glass layer by right-clicking and saying change object layer. There it is. Then this little clamp is on the default layer right now. We'll go ahead and rename this to be, I don't know, spider clamp, for lack of something better. Okay. And then I want to assign materials. And so I can go back to the material editor, and I can right-click on the material and say apply material to layer this time. And we'll go ahead and apply it to the spider clamp. Or over here in my layer menu, or my layer window, I have the ability to click on the little circle that's right next to the color. It's probably hard for you guys to see it, but on your own screens you'll be able to see it. I click on that little circle, and it will then let me pick what material I want. I do have to check the box for plugin, right here, because it's a V-Ray material. I'll go ahead and click Browse and assign Basic Glass. It doesn't matter whether you do it through the material editor or whether you do it through the layer or some of each. It's just another way of applying the material. So once I have those two put together, it wouldn't hurt to do a quick render and see what this looks like. Now, I'm probably going to need an infinite plane underneath, right? And I would really rather have it not cut off my object. Move, vertical. Right, we'll drop it down a little bit. And the other thing is it was created on my spider clamp layer, so right now it has a titanium finish on it. We don't need the ground to have a titanium finish. So I'm going to change the object to one of these other layers, which has no material applied. And now when I go ahead and render, right, we will see a very faint blue, right, for the glass, and we'll see the rod and the titanium. I could zoom in on it a little bit and see if we can see it a little bit better. This is the kind of thing where it's very, very difficult to see until you have more context. Okay? So I'll go ahead and render and see if we can see a little bit more of it. Alright, so we see the little clamp fairly well. We see a little bit of the edge of the glass, but the glass is clear. It's on a white background. We're going to see mostly white through it. And so this is enough. There is an option of changing the tint of the glass a little bit, and again, this is optional. If I go to Basic Glass here, and we scroll down under Refraction, there's something called Fog and then Fog Color. And if I pick, like, say, blue here, the glass is going to tint blue. This is obviously way stronger than it's going to turn out, such that if I go ahead and render it now, the glass is going to be kind of a bluish tint. So that might be too strong, so we can go back to my materials, change the fog color. We'll lighten that up a bit, maybe something like this. And we can go ahead and render again. And where we had it completely clear before, we have a faint bluish tint to it, which helps you to see it. It's not really realistic glass, but it does help you to see it. Okay? So when I'm done, I'll go ahead and save this as my image for today. So I need an exercise 207 folder. And we'll say exercise 207 render. Click save. We want to make sure that we also save the Rhino file, because we're going to use this as a block down the road, and I'm going to explain how blocks work in a little bit. So we'll use exercise 207 here, and I'm going to save this as EX207. Perfect. And I'll go ahead and click save. Okay, so I have both of those set. Today, concentrate on building this, learning the techniques for building something that's not a box or a derivative of a box. That's obviously what we're shooting for. And you can tint that fog color to make the glass show up a little bit better when you do your rendering. Are there any global questions? No? I know it's a lot to take in. I know it feels like all of a sudden things are getting more complicated. The truth is they're going to get more complicated, but this is, you're building skills, you're getting better. This will start to seem really easy. The funny thing is always, if you go at the end of the semester, you look back on a day like today, where it took you all day to model this one thing. This is the kind of thing that at the end of the semester will take you about 5 minutes, right? Likewise, it would take me even shorter than that. So you'll pick up this speed as you go along. All right.